I'd like everyone to this WFX webinar. My name is Justin Firesheets. I'm the production manager at Church of the Highlands in Birmingham, Alabama. And I want to take a few minutes today to talk you through a session called The Art of Apprenticeship. And in all fairness and copyright, I do want to mention that this is something that I was able to learn from a lesson that Andy Stanley once taught, the longtime pastor of North Point Community Church in Atlanta. But I first heard this lesson, and I thought it was a phenomenal teaching, and that there was a lot of very applicable content that really makes sense for people in the church world. And so this is a lesson that I've used in a couple different environments to teach tech guys all across the country, because I think one of the biggest things we struggle with as tech people is focusing on people instead of just the technology and just the task that is at hand. And so the whole lesson today is really about how to develop from a leadership standpoint to make sure that you're developing and training other people that know how to do what you do, so that you don't have to be the guy that does everything, and so that when you're not there, everything still runs and everything doesn't catch on fire and fall down. So hopefully this will be a practical lesson for you that you'll be able to put into play, because it was probably one of the best teachings that I've ever heard on this. And everything really starts with the example that Jesus sets, because when you're looking at a biblical leadership process, that's the best place to start. And so I want to look at a couple passages from the book of Luke, based on how Jesus developed his disciples, because this is a similar way to how we can work to develop people around us. And these passages are in Luke chapter 5 and chapter 6. If you can read along with me, after this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting in his tax booth. "Follow me," Jesus said to him. Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. And then moving on to chapter 6, verse 12. One of those days, Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray, spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples and chose 12 of them, whom also designated apostles, and it lists everybody's names. The important thing to note there is that Jesus went and found people he chose to follow him. And that's one of the most important things to know, because in Jesus' approach, and this is even before he began his ministry, but he began his ministry with succession in mind. When he started his whole earthly ministry process, he had developed who was going to follow after him. So a lot of people get discouraged saying, "Man, I've been in this job for so long, I haven't followed the right process, and you're right, I should have started my job here all with the mindset of who's going to take over after I leave, or who am I going to train up as a number two, and screw this up, and woe is me." Well, you don't have to get discouraged in that. There's an old saying that says, the best time to have planted an oak tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. So maybe we didn't start right with when we got into our ministry or when we got into our job, but the best thing we can do is take the steps now to thinking of, okay, succession. And really, what does that mean? It means I need to be focused on who's going to do this job after me, because your legacy is measured as a leader by the people that are left behind when you're not there. And you don't effectively leave another generation of leadership or another generation of talent in the cupboard, so to speak. That is diminishing your legacy from what you were able to accomplish. Yeah, you may have been good as a front of house guy, or as a lighting guy, or as a production guy. But if you don't leave talented and qualified people behind that are still able to carry all that on, all of that's just going to fall in the dumpster, because you're not there anymore, and somebody else is going to have to start from scratch. And so when Jesus began his ministry, he did that with the mindset of, I need to have people around me who I can train how to do this, because I'm not going to be here all the time. Other people need to know how to do what I do, so that all the pressure isn't on me to do it from now until the apocalypse. The second thing that Jesus did was he handpicked the ones that he could trust. And that was a key thing in those passages from Luke, because when he approached Levi, he said, "You follow me." And then when he went to the other guys, he intentionally chose who was going to be there with him. There it started out being hundreds and hundreds of followers that were following Jesus around. And he wasn't concerned about fairness. He wasn't concerned about equality. He wasn't concerned about helping everybody feel warm and fuzzy, and intentionally picked the guys that he thought had the attitude, had the aptitude, had the desire, had the ability to learn, so that he could pour into them. And I think in the church world, this is a mistake we make a lot. We're so concerned with being fair And if somebody has an interest, then, well, that means I need to let them on my team even though they may not have the most talent, or I'm afraid of more time with this guy because it may hurt this other person's feelings. Well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, honestly, if somebody's feelings get hurt. If they don't have the capability or the aptitude to learn how to do something, you can't invest the time in trying to teach them. And so it's all about picking who can follow you just as much as it is picking who can't follow you. And you can't be intimidated by fairness with this. You have to be strategic and intentionally choose who the people are that you're going to invest in, because you want to make sure you're spending your time with the right people that are going to pay dividends for you. Another thing that Jesus did that was critical is he rarely did ministry alone. And again, this is a trap I think we fall in as tech people a lot. We think that it's going to be easier and faster if I just go to this meeting and handle it, or if I troubleshoot this thing on my own because I can do it faster, or if I work on my budget by myself, or if I go meet with this vendor or spec out this project. It's going to be easier if I take care of it because I already know how to do it. I don't have time to explain it to anybody. I don't have time to teach anybody how to do it, so I'm going to tackle this. The problem is that if I'm the only one that's ever doing these things, nobody else ever has the opportunity to learn, and nobody else knows how to do it, which means if I'm not there, or I can't be a part of this process, or I can't be the one that's there to fix it, nobody else knows how to do it because they haven't been with me to walk through that. So Jesus intentionally avoided that problem, because everything he did, he always had guys with him. He even whittled down his 12 disciples down to an circle of 3 other guys that were always with him, again, because he was intentionally deciding who's going to be with me when I walk through these things and when I do this stuff, to make sure that there are people around that I can show. And then the thing with Jesus' approach that is worth modeling is he let the disciples minister while he was still around to debrief. And this is an important thing, because the first time you hand over the reins to somebody, to something of importance, shouldn't be when you're on vacation or when you're out or when you can't do it, because then you're not there to coach on the practical application of how to do it better, or how to improve it, or maybe how to handle a situation more effectively. Jesus sent the disciples out. Later on in Luke, I think it's in chapter 9, he sent the disciples out to do ministry. They came back with a report, and they all talked about it as a group. They talked about what happened, and he used that as a coaching opportunity to teach them on things that they had learned from all that, things that they need to do better or need to do differently or whatever else. We need to do the same things. We have to be able to coach other people with us being actually the ones that are doing it. We have to allow other people the opportunity to do it, and then we can give them instruction. Sometimes, again, we feel I'm too busy and I don't have enough time to let somebody else do it because it's not going to get done right, and then I'm going to have to go back and do it again. Or I can't afford to let this thing get screwed up, and so I'm just going to do it myself. That's not the right approach. We have to be able to take our hands off the reins. And a lot of times there are other objections to this, one of them being I'm not an expert, and so how can I possibly be the guy that trains up another generation of people? Personally, I felt this way. When I got my job here at Highlands, I was brought in to follow a guy that had years and years and years of experience. And I told my current boss, the guy that hired me, I said, man, I don't know if I'm the right guy for this because I don't have all the experience that he did. And he told me something that's always stuck with me and that I teach to the other guys on our staff right now. He said, I don't expect you to know all the answers. I just expect you to know where to go to find all the answers. It's a critical thing because you don't have to be an expert, because the truth is that I'm never going to feel adequately prepared to teach somebody else, because the best leaders are the ones that know they don't know everything. The worst leaders are the ones they feel like they already have it all figured out. And if that's the case, if you feel like you know everything, pack your bags, sign everything over to people in your family, and be ready for eternity, because you know you're obviously going to heaven ahead of all of us. Get ready to just move right out of the way because you've got it all figured out. But nobody really has it all figured out. None of us ever have really exceeded our learning potential. I require everybody on my staff, myself included, to have time invested in our schedules every week for professional development, because I always have to be learning. I always have to be learning new processes and new systems and new equipment, and other churches do it, and what's a good way to manage things because I have already understood that I'm not an expert, and that's okay. But it's also important that I hire people that are smarter than me. I feel intimidated because I may not be the smartest guy in the room. There's nothing wrong with that. I can't be an expert at everything. So I want to try to find people that are good at the things that I'm not good at and let them do what is their strength so that I can focus on things that are my strength. There's a John Maxwell saying the law of the lid and the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. He said that the growth of an organization is always limited by the growth of the leader. And if I'm not growing as a leader, the people under me aren't going to grow either. So it's important for me to accept the fact that it's okay I'm not an expert. Don't use that as an objection, but understand the fact that I'm never going to know everything, but I have to make sure that I'm learning it. It's also important to know that I don't have to know everything, and that's not my job to know everything. I don't have to know more than everybody else in order to prove that I'm the smartest guy out there. Again, I just need to know where to go to find the answers and be able to coach people on how to properly learn things. It's okay if I say I don't know what the answer is, just as long as I now go and try to find what the answer is. I need to be actively engaged in the learning process. But what I am responsible for is passing on the information that I do know. I may not know all the ins and outs of all the equipment and the best ways to do everything, but what I do have is practical experience, and I've got situational knowledge, I've got maturity, and I am responsible for passing on life lessons that I've already learned to other people that are coming up behind me. So I may have somebody that I'm teaching or training that's smarter on equipment than me. They may not have been around the block as many times as I have, and it's important to teach them the lessons that I've learned. And I have to intentionally pick the people that I'm passing on information to, and I also have to be thinking about, is there something that only I know how to do? Because then it's critical that I pass that information on. So I always use the term it's a bus factor. I don't want a high bus factor, which means if I get hit by a bus, what odds that somebody else can step in and do my job? I'm sure that the only place information is stored is not in my head. I need to make sure that stuff is written down. I need to make sure that there's hard copies of stuff around so that people can follow these things. I need to make sure I'm teaching other people what I know. I don't want to be in a position where I am the only one who knows something, and that is what I do need to make sure that I'm passing along. And ultimately, my responsibility is to empty my cup. Again, I don't have to be an expert at everything. I just have to pour out and pass along what I know. It's not my job to fill somebody else's cup. It's not my job to make them learn, but it is my job to pour out whatever information I have. So we've kind of debunked this I'm not an expert myth, so I'm not capable of training somebody. Another popular objection is, if I train somebody else how to do my job, then what will I do? Honestly, a lot of this really comes from a position of insecurity. Unfortunately, a lot of people are in job situations where they feel insecure because they feel that it's performance-based, and if I'm not the one doing everything, then I must not be good enough. Well, unfortunately, sometimes that's a negative work environment. But in a healthy work environment, you create more value by demonstrating your ability to lead other people and replicate yourself. If you've shown that you're able to teach other people how to do things and get more work done, you've demonstrated that you have more value than just being the guy that can actually do everything. So if I teach somebody how to do something and they get better at it than I am, honestly, that's a win, because that means that at the end of the day, the job is getting done better than it would have been if I was the guy to do it. Plus, they can now do something and excel at it, which means I can now do something that I can excel at. So we're not putting out a subpar product. We've been able to develop people that can do it more effectively and more efficiently. And the result of this is I can become a multi-site leader, which means I can now be in multiple places at one time. I'm in one place doing something that I do well. Now my apprentice, my disciple, my trainee is now somewhere else doing something that they're good at, which we're now getting two things done at the same time. We've doubled our productivity because I was able to take the time and invest that in somebody. I was able to teach them how to do things. I was able to take that time. I wasn't worried about being insecure and worrying about what happens if they get smarter than me. My was focused on how can I make this ministry better? How can I leave a healthy legacy behind? I've poured into somebody else, and now we can get twice as much work done. And then the other great result is that I can now become a multi-generational leader. It means knowledge doesn't end with me. The experience doesn't end with me. I've now been able to pass on what I know, what I'm capable of, how I need to do it, and somebody else is going to be able to do those things after I've gone. You want your organization to be built around principles and processes, not a personality. You don't want your team to all be based on how you are and how you do it, and it's all dependent upon you being the one to do it. You want policies in place of this is why we do it, and certain principles of how we need to format certain things or how we need to run certain things or whatever. Those things need to be hard and fast guidelines that aren't dependent upon me being the guy that's in the chair. Those are principles that should be enacted upon regardless of who's in charge. So that way, if I'm not there, if I'm on vacation, if I have now left the job, those principles and those ideals can still be left behind because I've been able to pass those along to somebody else. Because we want the quality of our job to be dependent upon me being the only guy that can do it. Because what that means is, A, I'm never going to be able to leave my job. B, if I do leave the job, the quality is going to suffer because the product isn't very good. But C, I'm now never going to be able to get sick or take vacation. And we all know that people get sick, things happen in your family, things happen practically where you need days off. Church tech people, I have experienced so many people that have gone through burnout. And a lot of it is because of stuff like this. They're not able to take time off. They're not able to take vacation. They have to be there all the time because they haven't been able to pour into other people. But we're able to take the time and invest in somebody else, find the people that have the potential, and it may not be a person that has the potential to lead this after you're gone. You may only be able to pour little pieces to other people, and that's okay, because what you're doing is you're still taking little things and passing them on to stretch them and help them grow, and you're still emptying in your cup. You don't have to feel like everything has to be dumped on one person, like this doesn't count if it's one person that can't do my job and all of the details of it. It's not an either-or scenario, so don't feel like this happened if it's not just one guy. You can find multiple people to teach how to do things and how to do different facets or components of the job. That's okay. That's still a win because there are still other people that are learning how to do things. And so the practical application of all of this, number one, hire for the future. And maybe you're not in a position to actually hire from staff. That's okay. So let's think of train volunteers for the future then. We can substitute the terminology there. But the point is that you need to hire people, if possible, that are younger than you and definitely people that are smarter than you, because you need to find people with greater potential than you have, because they're going to need to grow beyond where you're at right now, because chances are your ministry is going to grow. You're going to do more things 5 years from now than you're doing right now, because chances are you're doing more stuff now than you were 5 years ago. So you need to make sure that you're finding people to surround yourself with that are capable of learning and capable of growing. Usually people that are young are more aggressive, they're more eager, they have a lot more potential, plus they're not settled in their ways. Sometimes those of us that have experience get so comfortable with doing certain things because that's the way we've always done them, and sometimes that may not be the right way to do it in your particular environment. So finding people that are young, that are moldable, that can be shaped and taught how to do things the right way based on your environment, it's critical to find people that have that mentality. So when you're being intentional in selecting the people to follow you, to find the younger people that can learn faster and maybe learn more and have greater long-term potential. Second thing, remember from Jesus' approach, don't work alone. Whenever possible, invite other people to work with you. When you're working on budgets, when you're troubleshooting, when you're going to meetings, when you're designing a project, when you're working with a vendor or a contractor, whatever it may be, try to find somebody else that can be with you when you go through that process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of that. Andy Stanley broke it down. What he said, remember your meds, and that's an acronym. The M stands for model. which means I need to show people how to do this the right way. So when I have people that are working with me, I have to make sure that I am setting a good example, because in a leadership position, people are going to follow my lead. They're going to do what I'm doing, and so I need to be concerned about whether or not I'm doing it the right way or the wrong way. Am I doing something that I want everybody to follow and everybody to do? So I need to model the proper way to do it, whether that's labeling stuff or running a survey, whatever it is. I need to make sure I'm setting the healthy example. Secondly, I need to explain the process as I'm going through it with each people. And I got people that are working with me. I can't just be in a hurry to get it done just because I can do it faster. You need to stop and slow down during the process to explain what you're doing and why, because sometimes people can't just see what you're doing and put it into practice. You need to explain it as you go through it. Here's why I'm doing it this way, and here's what I learned about doing it the wrong way, and now why I'm doing it this way. Explain some of those practical things. Explain some of that experience that you've learned from. And then thirdly, demonstrate. So now I have shown them the right way, and I've talked through it, and now I'm just going to run it like it was a normal environment, because now that they have seen me do it and they've seen me explain why I do it, I can now run through this process start to finish, and they can see all the pieces come together and understand the big picture as to why something is being done. Now, I'm a John Maxwell guy, and he has a similar set of processes, which I've just called Master the M's, which is the same thing as Andy Stanley's Remember the Meds, but it's a couple more steps involved. And again, in a church environment, any pastor will tell you people don't listen or they don't remember if everything doesn't start with the same letter. So alliteration is your friend. John Maxwell knows this. Number one, model. Again, we've already talked about that. And as John Maxwell says, kind of sub-point under this is, I do it while you watch, because you need to know how to duplicate it correctly. Secondly, mentor. This is where the coaching is. I'm still doing it, but you're helping me with the process, and I'm going to explain how I'm doing it, and I'm going to explain why I do it. And something that's critical during these early stages is that people that are learning, you need to encourage them to take notes, and you need to encourage them, if possible, maybe if it's applicable, to take pictures of what stuff should look like, because it all makes sense in the moment, but when you step away and now you're asking them to do it, sometimes things get a little bit hazy, especially if it's maybe been a while since you walked through this process. So encourage the people you're training to take notes so you always have something to look back and reference as to why you did it. When I started this job here, I had one day with my predecessor, and he walked me through everything in our production booth, and I took dozens of pages of notes and still have that after 4 years, and there are still times when I go back and look at that to try to remember why things were done a certain way when our facility was designed 6 or 7 years ago. So it's important to encourage people to take notes. So I've explained it to them, and now I monitor, and what that means is you do it, but I'm going to assist and correct you during the process. It's critical that I make sure that I'm positive and encouraging, because I don't tear somebody down. I want to build them up and encourage them. I want to help them work to develop consistency. And here, as you're doing it, you need to start explaining things back to me, because that's one of the best signs of showing that you've retained information, is that you can now explain it back and actually reteach somebody else. The next step is motivate, which means that you're completely doing it by yourself. I'm not assisting you or coaching you. I'm just giving you attaboys to remind you that you're doing a good job at this. And now, as you do this, you've now taken ownership. It's now your process, which means you now have the ability to find a better way to do it, to find a more efficient way. You own this process now. I've taught you how to do it. I've handed it over, and now you have the ability and the ownership to be able to find a better way to do it. And then lastly is multiply. Now that you have learned how to do it, you're now responsible for teaching somebody else. Again, like I said earlier, the best way to show that you've retained information and that you've learned it is you're now able to teach somebody else. That's the best way to show that you've retained it, and immediately turn around and find, who can I now teach this to? So now this multiplication apprenticeship process continues to go one generation after another to make sure that as soon as we've learned something, we're passing that along to somebody else that we can teach. The takeaway with this is Andy Stanley said, success isn't measured by how capable I am of handling my responsibilities. It's ultimately measured by whether or not I leave my responsibilities in capable hands. That's true. I may not be the best guy, but am I finding other people that I can hand this off to? And in the takeaways, there's a couple of them. What can I do now to pour into someone's life? Again, what am I doing to intentionally develop people and pour out my cup into somebody else's and invest in them and teach them and train them? So be thinking, what can I do today, what can I do tomorrow or this week or this Sunday to pour into somebody else and make sure that they're learning and growing? The second takeaway, with the great potential, who's the person out there or the people out there that I can really pour into and teach how to do this? Again, I have to be intentional here, and it's okay to play favorites, but who out there are the ones that I can show how to do this to make sure that things are being handled the best way possible? Because again, I can't do this all by myself, and I can't do it for years and years and years to come. I've got to find other people that can do this, and that's why it's critical to be able to master the art of apprenticeship. So thanks so much for taking the time to join with me today on this webinar. Again, thanks to WFX for helping to facilitate this. Please, please, please find other people in the industry that can coach you and teach you on how to do things better. If you're still trying to figure out how to get things going yourselves, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, that can teach you how to do it, that have more experience. That's the best way for you to learn and the best way for you to know the best way to teach other people. I hope and pray that your ministry is blessed. Thanks so much for all you do to impact lives and to touch the kingdom. God bless.